What's up, everybody? Welcome to Unloose the Goose. This is episode 2339. Today, we're going to be discussing winter food production. I'm Sal Mayweather. We've got Nicole Sauce from Living Free in Tennessee, Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast. What's up? I hope you guys are surviving all the mayhem out there, or lack thereof.
The holler, man. It's crazy what's going on in the holler right now. I had to move firewood from outside to inside because it's going to rain.
Man, I got catfish fighting with goldfish out there. It's all racial. It's crazy rioting in the backyard, man.
Before we went on, I said to everybody it was a slave fight today. But
I get hate.
All right, so we're talking about winter food production. Nicole, why don't you kick it off for us and tell us, before we get into it, why is winter food production important?
The more food that you're able to produce from your environment, the more stable you are during shortages. That's actually what motivated me. One of the reasons. My other thing is that the food you buy in the grocery store doesn't taste very fresh. So they're shipping us peppers from wherever they're grown all over the place to get here. And so I think both from the standpoint of it tastes good and from adding more self-reliance into your life, like having nutrition in the winter that's not just meat, although Jack's just eating meat right now, I think.
I'm eating lettuce.
You're eating lettuce. It is a really good way to go. And then, you know me, I like to increase or decrease my need to spend money on things. I'm not cheap, I'm frugal. And spending $1 on lettuce seeds and getting lettuce for the whole winter is way better for me than, a couple bucks a head or $1.50 a head of lettuce. So it's a way to learn a really good skill that you can apply later on if you decide to go into spring gardening, and B, it's just a better way, I think, to enjoy awesome food all the time without worrying about having to drive to the store or any of that crap.
What do you think, Jack? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, my initial answer with why is it important in winter is because we eat all year. But there's actually a lot of really great opportunities with food production in the winter, especially if you live in the South like I do, and to a lesser degree Nicole does. It's in some things are actually easier to grow right now than they are any other time of year. I mean, as much as cilantro goes with tomatoes, I can grow all the cilantro I want right now. If I try to grow it in tomato season, it bolts and it can't handle the heat. So there's a lot of stuff we can do right now. It's also really a great time to be thinking about, the big production is your spring garden into your summer and fall. And, you just came out of a gardening season if you're a gardener. So all the things that you wish you had done and had ready for last year. So this is a great time to be looking at where you're going to construct new beds, putting in irrigation systems and stuff like that. And it's a great time to start looking at becoming more creative with how we grow. Like, I don't do this here because I don't need to anymore, but one of my methods for growing when I lived in Pennsylvania was using cold frames that I built out of like cheap scrap. So you go down to like a Habitat for Humanity or something like that, and you look for the external like storm door, screen door type with the glass in it, right? You can usually get one of those for like $25. You build a frame out of like 2x12s or 2 sets of 2x6s and attach it, and you put it in the ground, and then you've got a cold frame. You throw a little compost pile in there, and you've got supplemental heat, and you can grow a ton of food in a little 4x8 base, or usually you're about 3 foot by 6 foot, 6-7 foot, and you can build as many of those as you like. And so there's just a ton of opportunity, and the more you can learn like this, the more self-sufficient, self-reliant you come, because then you take that thing I just talked about building, and you're using that to grow some food through the winter. But as you start heading into spring, then you use that to start all your tomatoes and pepper plants that you're going to put out in the spring. So there's so many ways that you can take advantage of this time. And then I guarantee you Nicole's doing what I'm doing right now, but there's a big stack of catalogs somewhere in your house, isn't there, Nicole?
I've already ordered all my seeds.
Oh, you already ordered them all? No.
I have one kind of seed I need to live. But yeah, I had that stack. Yeah. I made it through over Christmas, but yeah.
Those bastards at Baker Creek just sent me their latest catalog. That's like seed porn.
Yeah, I know. I threw it away. I was like, not allowed to look. Not allowed to look. Already done. Like we had my entire dining room table, which is about 3.5 feet by maybe 8 feet or 6 feet. I had seeds from one side to the other over Christmas already here, and had all my neighbors over saying, "What are you growing?" Because I can't grow all of this. It's absurd. I have a problem, Jack. I have a problem.
Yeah, I do too. You know the meme that's from the American Chopper thing with the guys screaming at each other?
Yeah.
I made one a couple of years ago, and it's like, I just ordered catalogs from the new seed, new seeds in the catalog, and the guy's like, "You have an entire box full of seeds. These are new seeds for different plants," And that's almost me and my wife with that. But winter's the time for all that stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna order that cool looking okra off the cover of the catalog you threw.
Oh, that is pretty cool. I did see that.
I'll give you.
But now, where you guys live, that sort of dictates what you can and what you can't grow, though, right? So,
well, especially in winter, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the big thing. Like, so in your spring to fall season, your limitation, if you don't have some sort of frost protection, is days to harvest. So if you only get in some places maybe 100 frost-free days consecutively, you need to grow stuff you can grow in that window. If you get, like I do, it's like 200, then you can grow almost anything that's an annual. But when it comes to wintertime, it's not can you grow something, it's what does it take to be able to do it, and is it worth it? So I do a lot with indoor growing, and I think that really is one of the best things you can be doing right now. Hydroponics, little rack, some lights, little mini greenhouse rack. You can set the whole system up for $100, grow a ton of food, and do your starts when it's time to do your starts for your garden. That's going to work in Texas. It's going to work in Tennessee. It's going to work in Florida. It's going to work in New York. It's going to work in freaking Alaska.
Yeah.
Because you have complete climate control, right? If you want to grow peppers and tomatoes indoors like that, it's a lot for a little, right? Because you need a lot. Like if you think about a tomato plant being like 6 foot tall, that's a lot of light. You can't just stick one light above that plant and expect artificial lighting to do the deal for that. Then you got to be in there basically manually pollinating because you have no pollinators in the house for some plants. So I think it depends on how badly you want something, because you can do it anywhere, right? You can do a greenhouse and that'll work well. But I think one of the big things that people get misled about a greenhouse, they think they're going to buy like a greenhouse kit, put it together, and then just grow stuff in their greenhouse that would, die from frost if they didn't have a greenhouse. And it's not going to happen. If you have a greenhouse and you haven't done any kind of like thermal battery for it or some sort of supplemental heat, when the temperature goes to 25 degrees outside the greenhouse, you know what the temperature is inside the greenhouse? 25 degrees.
Unless
it will equalize very, very quickly, very quickly. There are ways to do that. Like, I can't remember what it's called. Nicole, do you remember what the thing somebody was sending around all over a few years ago where you build the greenhouse?
Oh, like the underground one?
Yeah. And
I don't remember what that's called either.
Those will give you 20 degrees of rise. So if it goes down to 20 degrees at night, it's 40 degrees in there. You can grow anything in them, but it's a lot of work. And you have to make a determination. Is it worth it to you? If you do a greenhouse attached to a house, the house is kind of heating the greenhouse is kind of heating the house during the day. And then the house kind of is heating the greenhouse during the night. And there was a dude, do you see the one with the dude in Nebraska that was growing oranges in Nebraska? Yeah, that's badass. And he kind of had it earth wrapped and attached to the house. And he's growing oranges and grapefruits and lemons and limes in Nebraska winter. It's 20 below zero outside. So you can do it anywhere, but you got to adapt the technology to make it work. And unfortunately,
if you're gonna grow oranges in Nebraska, like you have to love doing that.
You have to that.
Yeah.
You're not doing it because you love oranges. You're doing it because you love growing.
Yeah. I also think when I look at like his, it's so huge. If I lived in Nebraska, I would probably build something like that, and oranges would be a byproduct, because being able to walk out into that space and be in that space when everything's white and desolate and dead, because Nebraska's not I'm sorry if you're from Nebraska, but it's not exactly exciting in August. Right? I can only imagine like February after 6 weeks of being in the house with cabin fever, and you open the door and gee, it's snowing and windy again today. That's great. Having a space like that to be in, and then the food is the byproduct. I think that's where you're going there. And I would do it if I was like, I don't know, if somebody forced me to move to Nebraska.
So wait, I have to ask, how the hell do you grow oranges in Nebraska?
It's a giant greenhouse the man built. And it's basically bermed in on the sides and it drops down, but it's also on the south side of his house. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he's got the house as the back wall, and then the glass is facing forward, and the glass is angled down kind of lean-to style. So between the house and all that underground and that earth berm on the side of it, and it's a very large, it's the full length of his house. And it's like a full-size ranch, one-story ranch house. So it's massive, and he's walking around there. It's like walking around in like an what do you call it?
Arboretum.
Arboretum, like there's one down at Fort Worth at the Botanical Gardens, and it's like that. And he's got all these tropical plants and all these vegetables and all this stuff just growing in there.
That's crazy.
And he's old as shit too. He's like in his 80s. It probably took him 40 years to build it, and I just saw another one of a guy doing a similar thing in Bozeman, Montana. And he's getting like 30 degrees of rise, but he's still limited on what he can grow in the depth of winter because it goes to like 30 below. So if you get 30 degrees of rise and it's 30 below, it's 0 in the greenhouse. But his is even bigger. And he said he could have built his for about $25,000, but because he had to deal with Bozeman statism and their codes, it had to be built to residential building standards, even though it was a greenhouse. And so it cost him over $100,000 to do it.
That's crazy.
That's insane. Our good old friends from the state again helping us out
all the time. That's better just not to tell them what's up.
So, oh man, go ahead.
Nicole, you got hooked like a lot of people last year into the whole indoor hydroponics. Are you doing the jar lettuce again this year? Or anything?
No. So I did jar lettuce. So over Christmas, I was like, I got to do something. Jar lettuce, and I was growing heads of lettuce in jars using the Kratky method, which has, a plug with a plant in it, an airspace, and then nutrients and water, and then there's supplemental lighting. And I was just doing that because I was like, what do I have without spending a bunch of money on a bunch of crap to see if I like it? Well, I liked it. The lettuce tasted better than the lettuce at the store. That's all I needed to know, and it was easy to maintain. So I had seen what you were doing. So I started doing trays of lettuce.
Okay.
And during the shutdowns, didn't have to buy lettuce at all. Like we didn't leave here for 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. I think it was 6 weeks at all. And we had big fresh salads with dill and other herbs that I was growing inside. And then of course I have an aquaponics system outside. And as you said, some stuff just still grows. Yeah. I have parsley and cilantro up right now out there.
That's awesome.
In addition to some herbs and green onions. But so I didn't even miss, I kind of missed out of season stuff like squash and peppers, but it was just all growing. And so this year, the fall was a little busy for me going into Christmas. And I kept saying I was going to start the winter system up. I didn't start it until a week and a half ago. I now have like lettuce the size of my pinky nail, and 4 weeks from now I'll be taking my first cutting off that. So
I have on the front wall of my greenhouse, which is really not a greenhouse right now because it's not closed in, it's wide open, three 4-inch pipes as part of a hydro system, and I had them planted with arugula and then 2 different varieties, a red lettuce and a green lettuce. And we fed, if you were here for the workshop, unlike somebody, and who said he was coming but didn't, and so you got to see that, and we harvested the hell out of that system, Nicole, and we fed everybody like 2 salads. Like 80 people got 2 salads out of that system. Plus, we did a burger day where everybody had stuff for their burger doll. And it all grew back so fast that right now I have to cut some of it and feed it to the ducks because it's gotten too big. Yeah. Where it gets bitter. So I needed to have it in
where you had your strawberries?
Yeah, we can't keep up with it. Like I went full on like ketovore, so I'm like meat and like like the only thing I can have other than like lettuce and arugula and spinach and celery leaf right now is I'm letting myself have sweet peppers. That's my treat. And so I'm eating 2 salads a day, and I can't. And my grandkids are like, we've tricked them into salads. Like kids won't eat salads. When they grow the shit, they'll eat it, right? So they eat it, like everybody eats it. And like I was out there looking at the arugula going, oh, that's gonna be bitter as crap. So I fed like probably 4 pounds of arugula to ducks yesterday, just so I can regrow another flush in it. So I think eventually Like if you say like, well, how'd you figure that out? Well, I was here for 8 years and then I figured that out. Like
Right.
you figure out what works for you and your lifestyle over time. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. So I haven't started my indoor stuff either. But everything's ready to go. Basically, I just have to fill the trays back up and stick the plants in and turn the lights on. And I'm probably only going to do some limited starts for transplants indoors this year. I don't need to grow anything indoors this year. But if you live in New Jersey, like Sal used to, I probably would be growing indoors for the rest of my life after that experience last year when we all kind of jumped into that.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're in a northern climate, because we're talking a lot from a southern perspective here, if you're in a northern climate, you can totally grow inside in very little space. And Jack, you've done videos on that on your channel. I've done videos on that on my channel. And it's not very expensive to get started. It's like for under $100.
Yeah.
You just do it.
And the variety you can grow is stupid, right? Like, so I found that wasabi arugula. That's freaking crazy. It tastes like real wasabi.
Now I need that seed. I still haven't bought that seed.
Yeah, it's expensive, but you don't need much. They're really tiny. So the wasabi arugula was something I did last year. The Yad Fra Chinese broccoli, that was freaking amazing. I grew fennel indoors and basil. Basil was the one that basil and the wasabi arugula were the ones that converted people. Like, can you really just grow that? And you hand them a freaking piece of fresh basil in February.
Mm-hmm.
It literally a leaf has just been plucked. And I don't care what you buy, where you get it, it's not going to taste like that. And man, so I might do a little bit just with some basil and stuff, but I've got that system, the larger system like that now in my garage. So, there's, again, based on where you live, my garage is probably like April in New Jersey in February, right? So
what are some good indoor growing techniques, and what should people be growing in those northern climates where they can't grow shit outside? What should they be growing, and how should they be growing it?
Nicole, you want to take that?
Wow. So I think you should start with the easiest things to grow, right? So that's why I started with lettuces. It's really hard to screw up lettuce. And if you do screw it up, you know it immediately, right? And you can start again because it germinates in like 2 days. So I think lettuces and greens are a great place to start. But I also think it depends on what your capacity is indoors. I bought grow lights, and I bought nutrient, and I had mason jars, and that was enough to grow lettuce, some herbs like dill and basil and arugula. And that was enough with 10 jars to pretty much supply me. Okay. So I would say if you're not sure what to do and you want to get started, do an experiment like that doesn't cost all that much money. But if you're all in, then I think you can expand out into microgreens. I think growing microgreens, they're ready in a week, 10 days. It's a really good one. If you're really not sure, you want to get your toe in the water, sprouts.
Yeah.
Sprouts are ready in like alfalfa sprouts or whatever. They're ready in 4 days.
Yeah,
5 days.
Sprouts, you can take a mason jar and a piece of screen and attach the screen on the jar with the ring instead of the little center thing. Fill it up, shake it up, dump it out, and set it in your dish rack on your side of your dishes. And every day when you do your dishes, rinse it and rewater it and leave it there. And in 4 or 5 days, like Nicole said, you have a jar full of sprouts.
Yeah.
And then you just maybe 2 days into it, you make a new jar, and you just constantly have a never-ending supply. And that's really great nutrition. And the microgreens are I built a hydro system that's 3-tiered. It's got 3 trays in it, and I built the top tray for microgreens, and it'll do 4 trays of the 10-20 trays, 10 inches by 20 inches, or do 8 of the 10-10s. And I don't use it for anywhere near that much because 2 people can't eat that much microgreens. It's an insane.
Talking, Jack, because I want to go grab something and show people.
Okay, yeah. Because you look at a little tray of sunflower microgreens, and you're like, well, that's nice. And when you cut it and wash it and realize how much it is, you're like, holy crap, that's a lot of food. Because a chef's using a little bit for your pan-seared ahi or something down there in Florida now, that you went to Sal. But when you grow it yourself, we got celery.
Sal, you can do this.
Yeah.
I bought this celery at the store and it's continuing to grow now. I just pulled off from the outside. I have it here with some rocks. You don't have to have the rocks, but it makes it. And then it'll root. The reason I have this here is I want it to root before I transplant it to my aquaponics system.
That's what I do too.
But you can do this with heads of lettuce from the store too. So you can get 2 growings off of certain kinds of lettuce.
So for the people on the
windowsill in your kitchen.
For the people on the video that can see Nicole's celery there, you can see it's starting to turn really bright green.
Yeah.
The celery is like really frost tolerant once it's fully green. So I do exactly what she does, sort of. I have a little educational aquaponics system in my garage with like a 40-gallon fish tank and a little 14-gallon concrete mixing tray for a grow bed with some lights over it. So whenever I have celery like she had just had right there, I'll take that core and I'll drop that into that system until it greens up. Because if right this time of year, if I take it outside and put it in one of my outdoor systems, if it freezes before it greens up, it will kill it. It will kill it dead. But once it turns dark green like that, so now now we're getting to something really cool, right? This is really easy stuff to do on small scale, indoors, etc. Regrowing or growing out produce from the grocery store. Like one of my favorite things, if you have like a Whole Foods or someplace like that where they're like, really cater to foodies and they have like the baby beets, right? The little baby like golden beets or whatever. You buy a couple bunches of those and then you take them home and the greens on them are going to be kind of sad. So you just kind of trim them back and just stick them into either a hydroponics or aquaponics bed. You don't want to float that though. That's going to be your media bed. Or if you have any sort of soil that you're growing in, however you're doing it, you just plunk them in there and they just start growing. And then you end up with greens and the greens taste like Swiss chard. So you pick greens from it, but you let them keep growing back. And like 60 days later, you've had greens and greens and greens and greens, but the beet's been growing. And now you have this great big giant beet that's 5 times what it was when you bought it. So you're getting that value increase. And I mean, at some point you got to pick it or it's going to get so big, it's going to like crack and not be very good anymore. That you can do that. There's tons of stuff that you can drop in. What the hell's the stuff called? It's kind of like cabbage, Chinese food, Nicole. It's
leeks.
Bok choy.
Bok choy.
Bok choy.
Bok choy. You buy bok choy, you just pull the outside of just like celery and leave the core. Stick the core in an aquaponics bed. It grows right the frick back. And if you let it go long enough, it goes to seed. It puts these little things up that are kind of like little broccoli florets, and you can cut those off. And I mean, there's tons of stuff you can regrow from the grocery store. Green onions, cut the top off, use them, stick the ends in your system, grows back. I got onions.
Somebody on chat said something really insightful that I didn't even think about, but I do it, and that's radishes.
Oh, yeah.
Radishes are done in a minute and a half. If you like how 30 days. So 30 to 45 days. So those are pretty easy to grow. I tend to analyze inside growing though. Like if it needs to flower or fruit, that's not on my list.
Yeah. So when I had my aquaponics system in Jersey, that was one of my big problems. I couldn't get like stuff to flower and fruit because I didn't have enough lighting. But it was like you guys were saying earlier, like Jack said, like peppers and tomatoes, it was a no-go. But I did get some like leafy greens and shit to like smaller stuff to take.
And if you look at just like it always is a good idea as a home grower, don't try to be a commercial grower because it's 2 different worlds and you can grow things that are not going to make sense for them that make sense to grow. However, always look at what they do as being probably the baseline to work from. So I'm not talking about people growing fields of corn. I'm talking about like commercial, like we look at hydroponics and aquaponics, look at what commercial hydroponic or aquaponic greenhouse farms grow. They grow lettuce, they grow arugula, they grow herbs, right? And then anything else is special order. They grow a lot of flowers, especially edible flowers because they cater to chefs and high-end restaurants. And that's a kind of a cool thing to do. They grow watercress. And I grow watercress like crazy, and Nicole doesn't even think about growing watercress because it just grows on her property. Like she lives in a watercress land.
I have a watercress meadow.
She literally has a watercress meadow.
I do. It's like a creek with lots of it. Yeah.
And like in the spring, I grow the hell out of nasturtiums because I got to get them in as early as possible because by the time you get into midsummer, they're like, no, screw you for putting me in Texas. I'm going to die. But, you get the flowers and the leaf, and that's very peppery. That watercress made me think of that. So I think one of the things to do, again, is you look at commercial production, and there's your base, and then think about what are the things that you can do that either those commercial people don't do because it doesn't make sense for them, but it makes sense for you. Like they're probably not growing our giant squashes or anything like that. But also look at the stuff that they're doing where they are catering to a chef, like microgreens, like edible flowers, like custom herbs and things like that, because you can grow. Those things are so well designed now. If you look at what the commercial people are doing, they're growing a butt ton of them from a single 10-foot row. So if you're just adding 1 or 2 grow spots for something like nasturtium or watercress or whatever, my God, you can grow so much of that for your household. And now you're eating something that people are selling to chefs at yuppie restaurants for like $40 a pound. And I'm not kidding. I mean, like our mutual friend, John Dowie, when you hear him talking about selling microgreens, it sounds like he's talking about selling dope.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, I gave this guy a couple grams of that and like sampled them. And like, they sell by the gram, or the ounce. And it's like, it sounds like he's talking about dropping dime bags somewhere or something because it's that expensive. And so you can grow food for yourself you can't possibly afford to buy. And it doesn't have to be a lot of work. And I don't know, Nicole, to me, this is the best time of year to start something like that because otherwise especially if you live in Nebraska, you can either start an indoor garden or kill yourself if you live in
all our listeners in Nebraska.
Yeah, we lost all 3 of them.
By the way, guys, I want to remind everybody to check out the Greater Reset event. I believe it's called the Greater Reset, and that you can check it out at greaterreset.net. I'm going to be speaking there on the 25th about counter economics. Jack, I think you're speaking there as well, right?
27th, I think, is my day. I'm not sure though.
Okay, yeah, I think also. Okay, yeah, the whole gaggle's in there. Yeah. So check that out. That's greaterreset.net, and that's an initiative of the Freedom Cell projects, Freedom Cell Network. So that check that out.
Yeah, and I think the agenda is coming out later this week, maybe. So
what is?
The agenda should be like speaking when I think is coming out soon, so people can arrange their schedules. But it's going to be a digital delivery of that, so it's going to be streamed online. And if you want to be in the loop on how that's happening, the greaterreset.net has a sign up for email. So definitely signed up for that.
And Jack, you're speaking about this, right? Growing your own food, or
sort of.
The agenda should be like when I think is coming out. Did we just lose Jack? No. Okay.
So I think I'm speaking about backyard food production, specifically coming from a standpoint of a lot of aquaculture is what I talked to John about today. And like a cool thing that I didn't know how well he had done with getting other speakers. I think Dr. McCullough is got a session as well.
Oh, cool.
That's pretty cool. I don't know how he got him, but he did. So that's pretty badass. When you get somebody that's been on like NBC and CBS to come to your thing against the establishment, that kudos to John.
I don't even know who that guy is. I have to look him up.
Dr. McCullough, he's huge, dude. He's huge. Alternative health stuff. But I mean, he's been on like the Dr. Oz show and all that crap. And John got him for this. That's badass.
All right. Well, let's get back to winter food production. So what are some good ways that people can sort of transition into like the spring? Because like I know a lot of people like to get ready early. I have a friend up in Jersey who gets ready like super early. He's probably already planting shit for spring.
I'd already be starting my peppers if I was in New Jersey, probably right now.
Yeah, he does, and he does it all like indoors. He's like start his tomato plants until they get like yay big, and then he moves them around and stuff.
So what you do is you determine when it comes to starts like transplants, how long will it take you to bring that thing from seed to the size you want it when it goes into the ground. And then you need to go to like almanac.com or the New Farmer's Almanac or whatever and find when your average last frost date is. And then you probably, if it's anything that like this, if it gets like even a little bit of frost, it's going to die. And you don't want to be out there trying to take care of it in the middle of the night with a blow dryer, then you probably can keep it alive. You want to maybe plan to put it in the ground about 10 to 14 days after that day. So then if you need 6 weeks, you count back 6 weeks from that day, and that's the day or somewhere around that time that you start your plants. I will tell you, if you get into using Kratky hydroponics for your starts, you have to be careful with this, because you end up with plants that really need to go in the ground long, because that's what happened to me last year. I'm like, oh, I'll do my tomatoes 6 weeks in advance, and 24 days later, I had tomato plants were this big, and they were up against the lights, and I basically had to start over because they weren't going to make it if I put them outside. So that's thinking about your transplants. And then the other thing to be thinking about, though, is like all the stuff that you didn't get done. Like, that's what I said. Like, look at everything you wish you had done last year before, the main season started, and work on that now. Like, I'm lazy. I just put a video on how I make my compost, but I needed to when I was off for a couple weeks, took one day and went and cleaned out the chicken coop and duck coop and built my giant compost pile, because I know it takes, when I don't want to turn it, I don't want to work on it, I don't do that 22-day compost crap. I put it in a pile and let it go. So I know when I put that in a pile, it needs about 3 months under a tarp to be ready. So I know in March, when I go to do my garden transplants now, and I want to put a handful of compost in with every plant, it's ready. It's done. I don't have to even think about it now. It was one day, piled it up, let the birds pull it apart a bit, threw it back together, throw a tarp over it. It's ready. And that's, if you like, I wanted one more bed, build that bed, now if you want to do a garden bed and you don't need to do raised beds, because where you live, you don't have the hellacious soil problems that I do. You can go out right now, mark out where you want your bed, throw down a couple bales of straw and throw a tarp over it, and just kill everything by denying it light. As long as there's no snow on the ground, it snows on top of it, big deal. And if you just do that, in a few months, when you go to plant it and you pull that tarp away, it'll be full of worms, and it'll be in great shape. You won't have to do any work. You won't have to dig. You can just mulch and plant. If you really want to take it a little higher, take a few handfuls of chicken feed and throw that down before you throw your straw and your tarp down, so you're feeding the worms. And when you pull that back, it'll literally look like a bait shop under there. And so think about how you can do small amounts of lazy man type work right now to avoid miserable work, because I don't know about any of y'all, but I do not like busting sod with a shovel. I don't find that to be fun at all. I don't know. If I wanted to do that, I'd have a landscaping business, and I'd have a machine that did that.
So what do you that way more than I wish.
Nicole, what sort of tips do you have for people trying to get ready for spring? What should they be doing?
Well, Jack is right on. 100%. Get your beds ready. Every day that you can be out there getting your beds ready, get your beds ready. It does depend where you live, though, because I went out over New Year's weekend. It was 70 degrees here. It's not usually 70 degrees here, but it's Tennessee, so who knows what's going to happen. I went out there and with that intention, like, it's a great day. I'm going to get the beds ready. I'm going to use some mulch and get, a leg up on the weeds this year. And I'm looking around, and there's bergamot up already. I've got the mints are up. They usually aren't up. I've got comfrey up.
You have stuff growing.
I have stuff growing. And so I was like, well, I'll get some like brassica seeds and throw them out here.
Yeah. Because
the worst thing that's going to happen is nothing. And now that the bed's ready, if I do get, brassica broccoli or whatever, or cauliflower, if they do start growing, then I'm good to go. And then I came inside and went to my Kratky system and started cauliflower so that I can maybe transplant them early, because I'm taking that right now, that and the fact that my ducks have increased their egg output, as a sign that we might get an early spring, or we might not. So you can't put all of your seeds in one basket there. But if you're observing that spring, like as you do gardening year after year, if you're observing that spring is coming, I call it seed roulette. I'm playing seed roulette right now, where if I get it, it's awesome. And if not, it whatever. Here, if we get an early spring, we also get the early summer. And if I don't hit that window, then it's peppers and tomato season at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, so this is a little bit late in the year to think about at this point, but for me right now, my main gardens are full of like daikon radish, purple top turnip, winter pea, and barley. And that, I mean, we'll take some of the like, I'll let some of the radish go because the I'm not big on radishes as a thing, but the daikon, the big white ones, are good fermented, and the little seed pods that come on them, those are the most delicious thing in the world, those things. So I'll let a few of those grow. We might eat a little bit of turnip, but honestly, that's just a cover crop. All that's doing is putting roots down into my garden for fertility for the next season, because I'm doing all my main food production in aquaponics, hydroponics, indoors, in greenhouses and garages through the main winter. But like you, Nicole, I've got stuff that just didn't die this year. Like we got frost, and like my calendulas are growing. So whatever's growing, just let it grow. With the tarp thing, I was thinking more about people that are like, I'm going to put in 2 garden beds this year, and they don't have a garden bed yet. That's miserable work if you don't get out ahead of it. If you tarp that, that's more what I'm talking about. But definitely, you know, like I said, it's probably too late this year for most folks, but cover cropping, and that gives you mulch. But if you do it strategically, like I did, it also gives you livestock feed. So we'll have 4 beds of barley by the time it's time to plant everything else. And we'll go out and we'll take all the barley heads off with a sickle, and that's duck food. And then the rest of the plant, we'll just take that off with a second going of the sickle, and that's straw, and that's mulched. So then we'll seed, and we'll drop the straw on the seed of the next crop. And so there's just tons of stuff. And even though that activity is going to take place in March, it began in November when I made all my students do it for me. And I'm a little bit late. It should have happened a few weeks earlier, but I let it go so that when we had people here, they could learn from it. You would have been here and learned from that too, Sal, if you would have shown up.
Yeah, he would have.
Yeah, it would have been great.
I'm not going to live that down until next year at the next TSP event.
And then we're not going to believe that you're coming.
Yeah, I know until I show up.
Well, you can make it up by coming to mine.
Yeah.
Yes. When is that? Tell us about that.
So April 22 to 24 is the Living Free in Tennessee workshop, which is a total ripoff of what Jack does. But it's kind of become our own thing too. And tickets go on sale on the 15th. So to members
of January.
Yeah. But I've got some pretty cool speakers that I have not yet announced. And I probably shouldn't let the cat out of the bag here, but we'll see. I'll think about it during the episode.
And I may be doing a spring one myself this year. If I do, it will be a smaller head count so that my wife and I don't kill each other. But it'll be probably like 25 students we'll take. And we're going to probably actually be putting in berry beds for one day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that'll be cool.
When is that?
I don't know yet, but it will not be the week of April 22nd. It will probably be like the first week of April-ish. It depends on, you know.
Wait, if it's early enough, I can go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Berries are really amazing. I used to buy like really exotic berries off of Amazon and try to get them to grow up in Jersey with very, very limited success. Like Ironia berries and elderberries and mulberries and golden berries.
Man, Jersey's ground
all that shit's really good for you.
You should be able to rock that, man.
So before we started the show, Sal's like, I haven't done much growing.
I did. That was my main crop.
He's talking about all the stuff he grows.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you lied.
Well, no, I mean, in Jersey, I mean, now that I'm in Florida, it's different. In Jersey, I did a lot of it, but it was like Jack said, it was mainly just berries, really. I had a huge blackberry section, a huge blackberry bush. Then I had a nice strawberry patch, and I had a bunch of just, auxiliary items that I also have a grow tent that I used to grow weed inside, and now I just kind of stocked up because I'm in Florida. But there's all sorts of great options and ways that you could grow indoors in a cold climate if you're really determined.
You grew wheat inside in?
No, weed with a D,
not a T.
The other wheat.
I'll on you a bit about that in a second. Like, okay, just flat out say, okay, cool. It's like, wheat? No, you didn't grow wheat. Bullshit.
You need a very big tent to grow enough wheat to make it worth your while.
That's actually the long-term plan of the global elite, though, is they plan on doing grains indoor grain systems. They think they're about 15 years out from it being economically viable with technology and lighting costs and all. And
and it makes sense.
That'll be great. We'll all live on soybeans that are grown in factories that are stamped into the shape of a chicken. That's why we're talking about this, by the way, guys. If you don't get on board with doing some of this, that's your future. Chicken soy.
The Incredible Burger.
Soylent Green.
What would you say, burger?
The Incredible Burger?
Oh, the Impossible Burger.
Impossible Burger, whatever. I was on my way home from California on a plane, and I had a layover in Vegas, and I was hungry. So
you ate one.
I see all these burgers, and I say, how do I know what's on these burgers? Because they have like the COVID menu with no information on it.
Yeah.
And the lady said, well, the only one with real meat's that one. Those other ones are the Impossible Burger, which is plant-based.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I know which one I want. Because that'll pretty much cause the worst flight of my life if I eat soy before getting on a plane. But yeah, I just thought, wow, it's already infiltrated the airports.
Yet another reason not to fly.
I don't know.
One of many.
It's when you got to bring your COVID passport that I'm out.
Yeah.
Or you have to get swabbed in the brain with a Q-tip by some socialists.
I think there's one country's already done it. I don't know if it's Malaysia or somebody's already taken the plunge to where you have to have an immunity passport to get on a plane now.
Wow.
I didn't really read much about it.
There goes that tourism industry.
Yeah.
Well, I know some places still you don't need the PCR test. And in Mexico, there's a couple places in Africa. I think Croatia, you don't need one. I don't think the United States requires one. I don't know.
I'm waiting for this whole thing to just explode into a giant breakup. I think it'll be soon. And
I think so.
I'm going to be emperor of Texas. I understand. I'm going to take over as emperor of Texas when it happens.
Yeah.
The warlord of Fort Worth.
I love people like, hey, so can I come down? No. We're going to have a deportation policy, not an immigrant policy. There's going to be some people packing their bags and heading to Arkansas or Oklahoma. I don't know where, but you're going to have to leave. I'll let Sal in if he ever shows up, and Nicole's always welcome. Nicole's going to be,
I'll be there.
In Tennessee anyway.
Yeah, we have a pretty good group here.
Yeah, you do.
All right. Let's. I want to talk about aquaponics because I didn't know, Nicole. I didn't know that you had an aquaponics system. Tell me about that.
Well, it's Jack's fault, like many things are, because he's a jerk. My first workshop, when I was ripping off his idea to have a workshop, I invited him to speak because it's really good to have really cool speakers at your workshop. And he and his buddy David came up and installed an aquaponics system for me. I had talked to David for a long time about doing it because with aquaponics, I was one of those listeners to Jack's podcast who was like, I don't think this really applies to me because I have all this awesome dirt out there. Like, why would I do it? And then David was doing a presentation about, because he has like a more of a suburban home that's just tricked out with plants everywhere. He's turned his swimming pool into a fish pond. Like, it's awesome. And I saw that and I thought that looks like a lot less weed pulling. And it's kind of nice to have green things around you. So I talked to him. I said, well, what if I'm not really trying to grow fish for meat? Like, I just want the plants. And, and he was like, backhanding me. Well, that's what it's for, Nicole. Of course you get the fish too. So then he came up with this idea of a fishless aquaponics system, and they came and put it in. And that first year I had a weekly picture of this thing going from like kind of raw wood and a couple sad little plants that had been transplanted into to just like explosive growth and vines of cucumbers going 20 feet off of it. It was crazy. And I was just sold. I mean, this year, Jack doesn't know this yet, but I'm actually going to balance it with fish.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because you could add nutrients to the water, right? And then I have some fish, and my nutrient level last year was kind of wonky because of that. And so I'm going to actually put enough fish in. I reached out to David and he's like, well, I did build it so you could have fish and it would balance. And I was like, of course you did, because you knew before I did that I was going to add fish later. So,
well, I mean, isn't aquaponics without the fish just hydroponics?
Sort of, kind of, but no. Because what Nicole was doing was natural nutrient. So you were using carrot juice, right? And
carrot juice or fish kelp, and
you can use fish kelp. You can put fish food into that
Worms.
system, and it breaks down and it does the same thing as if the fish ate it. It makes nitrite and it gets nitrate. It gets converted to nitrite and taken up by the plants. So you can do, it's kind of fishless aquaponics. And then when you're doing that, you and that's what we did with hers. We dumped a shitload of worms into the bed. So the worms live in the grow beds. So you can take fish feed or chicken feed or whatever, and you throw it right up on top of the grow beds, and the worms will come up at night and eat it. And then the worms crap. And so you're really doing more wormponics than anything else in there. And you can add nutrient with, compost. You can take compost, take like an old pillowcase, fill it up with compost, tie a rope on it, throw it in your tank, and let it make basically compost tea. And all of those are different from hydroponics. Hydroponics, you're splitting hairs, because aquaponics is really hydroponics that we use fish in. I mean, that's right. But if you're trying to divide that with hydro, you're using a specific controlled nutrient. Like you're mixing a recipe, you're taking a measurement, and that's what makes it in some ways easier. Because if I have a deficiency in potassium for my lettuce, I just add more potassium. If I take that approach when I got fish in there, I can have a whole bunch of dead fish. So hydro's easier from a standpoint of managing the plant system and getting everything optimized. Aquaponics to me is easier because I don't have to sit there mixing nutrients, I mean, and I think if you were small scale people like Nicole and I, what we're doing, it's easier. If you're doing a 2-acre greenhouse and you're growing commercially, like the reasons most of those guys, even if they start aqua, end up going hydro is, if this crop isn't optimal, I can lose this restaurant and I can lose $50,000 a year in business off one customer.
Right.
And they can't handle that. So they like that ability to dial things in. And some of the systems they have now, like you don't even touch it. Like at that scale, you just keep the reserve tanks full of like your nutrient mixes, and they'll be in like different ones. And a computer like goes, oh, they're a little bit low in this, and it squirts a little bit in it, waits an hour, and it takes another reading, and it's completely automated. And that's why they go that way. To me though, like I said, when you're us backyard level, aquaponics is way easier, because when there's water's low, you're not mixing it and trying to figure out the ratio. Just add water.
Yeah.
And the fish take care of it from there.
And you can grow a lot.
The better you are.
Over New Year's. I had this.
What's that?
My system accidentally emptied itself over New Year's, and I had really sad fish in that much water.
Oh, that happens.
Yeah, there was ice involved, but
float valve.
Yeah, no, it's really good if you have a stock tank heater that you plug it in.
Yeah. Okay.
15 degrees out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not ebb and flow, or is that wick? What kind of system is that, Nicole?
So I have 3 beds. I have 2 wicking beds, which at this time of year they're not being used. Well, I mean, they're being used, but I'm not putting water.
You're not running water through them.
I've pulled everything out, so if there's a freezing event, I don't burst the fittings there. And then my ebb and flow bed is going, so it's a fill and flush or ebb and flow, and that I've had it through 8-degree nights with just row cover and lamps under it, and then not row cover, but a shower curtain, row cover, and then. And then the stock tank heater keeps the water at like 40 to 45 degrees.
Yeah.
So, and it's because it's constantly moving, I haven't had it freeze. I don't know what'll happen if we get into the negative temperatures. I don't know what I'm going to do, but.
Okay. So now, there's
the big experiment, because we haven't been that cold since it got put in place.
So like there's 2 parts to aquaponics though, right? It's not just growing like, leafy green vegetables and stuff like that, but it's also growing fish. And I think like one sort of trick is like to start with like goldfish. And then like once you like build up like a good amount of bacteria in the water, then you can sort of move to tilapia. And I think if I remember correctly, they grow pretty quick. They reach like full size relatively quickly, and you should be able to harvest them. I want to say in like 6 months or something like that. Do you guys know if that's correct?
That's what everybody says, but was not my experience. I actually have developed a complete and total hatred for tilapias and aquaponics fish at this point. If I lived somewhere where they lived outside through the year, I think I would love them. I really do. The one crop of tilapia that I actually brought through to harvest. I could have harvested them, but they were really small for harvest size. And I had them in one of my outdoor ponds. It was a 300-gallon stock tank or a 500-gallon stock tank. And the water temperature got down to like 48 degrees and they're supposed to be dead. And they were still swimming around in there. I'm like, well, okay, look at you. And when it got down to about 39, they all did this. They just laid flat on the bottom, but they were down there with their gills moving. Oh. So I had a 300-gallon Rubbermaid stock tank. So I threw it in the garage, filled it up with water, and they were easy to net because they weren't trying to get away. And I threw them in there in like 60-degree water. I'm like, oh, they're probably all going to die. I'm going to have to clean them. And I turned the pump on and I walked back in there in 15 minutes and they were all swimming around. So they're pretty badass from that standpoint. But then I had to take care of them all winter long in there. I threw a 300-watt aquarium heater in there and kept them alive, netted them back out, put them into one of my IBC systems. And then by the end of that year, they were huge. But I grow mostly catfish and bluegill because they live here. They live in New Jersey, right? They live in Pennsylvania. So everywhere. When it gets cold, they just stop eating, which is great. So you just don't feed them in the coldest part of the winter. I've had ice, an inch deep on some of my ponds. They're under there. They're fine. If it's going to be a long time, you might want to drill a hole like ice fishermen do to let some air exchange happen. But I mean, to me, tilapia are great fish in the tropics or indoors. Like if you don't have supplemental heating or naturally stay like optimal, they like water no colder than 50, 55 degrees. And like, just because I said my tilapia lived down to like 39, I think they can do that. But I think the reason they were able to do that is because they experienced a very, very slow transition in the winter. And I think if you took tilapia out of an indoor fish tank and threw them in 45 degrees, they would just instantly die.
Aren't they also assholes?
They're kind of dicks. They're not that bad. Tilapia are a lot like bluegills in that if you have like 5 bluegills, they'll beat the shit out of each other. But if you have like 100, they won't, because it's like being in prison and you're too busy worried about being shivved in the back to shiv somebody else in the back. So you're kind of always checking the full clock. So they don't really have time to get into it anymore. So there's certain fish that they need to be actually either in higher stocking densities or you need enough places for everybody to go hide. Like in my ponds, I build towers out of cinder block, because then you have every little angry fish gets a hole. And as long as he's in his hole, he only cares about what he can see. And tilapia are a lot like that as well. That's the key to breeding them, is giving them, like, people use like 6-inch flower pots and stuff like that in 55-gallon tanks to breed them. But to me, like, they're too much trouble. They're too high maintenance. And they don't have any flavor, right? Like, I can make tilapia taste good, but that's because ginger and gochujang taste good. That's why I can make a tilapia taste good. Like, channel catfish tastes good. Like, all I need for channel catfish to taste good is butter, right? It's like, I need butter and a grill, and I'm good, right? Bluegill, they're smaller fish, but they taste they're fantastic, white, flesh, sweet. And so I like to grow fish that are local. I go down to the farm, the little park ponds, and I have to deal with park Karens, but I catch my fish right there, little bitty ones, throw them in my system. When they grow up, I eat them. So they literally cost me no money. If I wasn't trying to make things all nice and pretty, I would just go get a used free on Craigslist 24-foot round above ground pool and buy a new liner for it. And I would turn that into a pond. And for $500 total all in, you could have a 20,000-gallon pond in any backyard that could have a pool in it. That's kind of what our mutual friend David did, except he has an in-ground pool. So his looks all freaking badass, man. His it's unbelievable. I can't even begin to describe it, without pictures.
Yeah, he doesn't do things in halves.
No.
Who's this guy?
He's a buddy of ours named David. He lives he's like 20 miles from me, but it takes like an hour to get there because the roads where he lives are stupid.
Yeah. I wish he'd just move next door to you. It'd be easier.
I'm trying to get them. If they die.
You're waiting to die.
I hate being like that, but it's like.
Somebody on the YouTube chat brought up Vermiponics, Jack, which I know you've talked about. That's something I wanted to
That's
play
basically
with
what you were doing.
What is that?
Vermiponics is worm aquaponics.
Yeah.
It's not regular earthworms, am I correct?
They live, like, people say that only compost worms, which are like the red wigglers.
Yeah.
But I have big ass night crawlers that I find in my ebb and flow. But generally, you use the red wigglers, and you just, like, an ebb and flow bed is perfect for them. That's going to be something with like lava rock or leca, which are the little marbles, or air rock or air stone. And I don't know where they go, because I don't think they really want to be underwater, and that water level's coming up to only like an inch from the surface. And it's not like every time it cycles, you see them pouring out of there, but boy, they're in there. And like I said, if you just throw anything for them to eat on the surface of that bed, it's gone the next day. Like, I can go out to one of my ebb and flow beds and take like a handful of the duck food, and I put that on the top, and then the next day there might be one kernel of it left. So it had to go somewhere, and that's where it goes. Those worms eat it, and then they make new worms, and they make worm poop. And then that leaches. Anybody that's ever done a worm farm knows you get like worm tea. And there was a lady that did like a PhD level research project on this. And she was trying to figure out basically how to do aquaponics organically and not do aquaponics with fish. And she was using worm tea. She didn't have it the way I just described. She had more like a worm farm.
Yeah.
Worm tea was leaking into the system, and then the system was cycling just the worm tea.
That's what I want to play with this year.
And she said, I looked at the nutrient profile, and there should not be everything plants need. Like, this is not Brondo. It's not what they crave. They should have helped, but it should have. But everything grew fantastically, and there's some level of biology going on there that's allowing the plants to get the nutrients through this life cycle. And that's, and there's lots of different ideas. Like, I'm actually talking about doing something I guess you would call duckponics this year with a new system that I'm working on. There's any way that we could take nutrient and recycle it, as long as we can do it safely, because like if you do duckponics wrong, you could give yourself salmonella, and that's probably no fun. I don't have any practical experience, but I'll take other people's words for it that you don't want it.
Not fun. An unfortunate piece of undercooked chicken once. Okay, so Sal, you're listening to all of this, and you've already done aquaponics, and you've already grown berries. Does it make you want to start doing stuff where you are, and what would that be?
Well, see, the problem is I'm on the move. Otherwise, I would be like I'm, I don't know where I'm going to be in 3 months. Otherwise, I would be all set up exactly. I would probably have berries growing right now. And, in Florida, you can grow a lot of cool stuff down here because it's like a tropical environment. So there's all sorts of things that I could grow here that I wasn't able to grow. Exactly. Like orange trees and mangoes and pineapples and all kinds. There's an avocado tree at some place I was just looking at. So
avocados. I wish I could grow those.
Like,
growing naturally.
Sal, I would grow, because you can grow outdoors, right? Even now. So I would use the grow bags, because anybody that's ever been like, I'm going to grow some trees in a pot, and then when I move, I'll take them with me, finds out like it costs you more to move that freaking giant pot of dirt than that tree's worth.
Yeah.
So you're not going to take stuff like that with you economically. But if you do the grow bags, then all that your waste product in at one is soil. So you leave that behind for the new homeowner. You put it on the shrubs or whatever, and the bags fold up. And then that way you can grow, and that'd be best for, I think, I'm going to have people in the comments that are going to be like, I grow cantaloupes or whatever. But, again, your leafy greens and stuff. But to me, that's like, nobody wants to grow lettuce, but it's the thing that costs the most money. Go figure out what you pay for a pound of organic greens. You pay more for that than you do for ribeye. And I'm not kidding either. You do.
One of the problems though that I remember when I was growing lettuce was I always dealt with I was battling the slugs, and I didn't want to use pesticides and shit like that. So I would take like coffee grinds and I would sprinkle it on the lettuce. But even that,
it's drunk.
What's that?
You got to get your slugs drunk.
How? What do you mean?
They like beer. Beer has salt. Beer makes
me too.
Go. Yeah. See, you like beer. They like beer. Get them drunk. It won't solve all your problems, but it really helps.
That doesn't mess up with the quality of the lettuce, though.
No, well, so right next to where the lettuce is growing, you bury like a little butter dish or something, right, in the ground, like it's a little pond. So it's not actually touching the
beer pond.
And then you put beer in there instead of water.
Oh,
and then when they come along, they're like, "Oh, what's this?" So they go in there, and then they can't get out.
Yeah.
Oh, That's what I would do too.
Now, if you have ducks,
Now
you
we know
don't
how-
have a slug.
Now we know how to
problem.
catch you.
Yeah.
Make a beer pond, Jack.
Yeah, Bill Mollison said if you have a slug problem, what you have is a duck deficiency.
Mhm.
Right? So
Mm.
if you have ducks, you have insufficient duck. If you have sufficient duck, you don't have a slug problem, because if a duck finds a slug, it's not going to be a slug for long. It's
Really?
going to be a slug, but it's going to be
Okay.
plugged out the other end. Like a duck, that's candy. You know what sucks about slugs is you can't eat them. It's
No.
dangerous for people to eat, because if they were like snails, like they grow in France, I would have a slug farm. I would grow slugs, but they're not safe to eat for people. So
That's what the duck's job is, to convert it into something that we can process.
yeah.
But in Jersey, you can't have ducks running around,
learned
the
something
North
new
Jersey
today.
housing projects.
Is Jersey anti-duck?
Well, I mean, what are you gonna do? We have wild ducks in the North Jersey housing
I
projects.
thought everything was legal in Jersey.
Well,
No.
there's ways
Except
around
economic
things
activity.
like that. Like I have a friend now. He lives in a place where he's got like 5 acres, and all the houses are 5 acres, but it's also like a Karen HOA place, so you can't have poultry. You can have a horse, but you can't have a chicken. And so I was talking to him, and he's like, "Well, we have wild turkeys that show up once in a while." I'm like, "Get turkeys." He's like, "Well, what kind of?" Well, not white ones. Get like the Nagasets or something that look like wild turkeys. Give them a place to live that's not obvious. And if somebody says something, go, "I don't know. I got turkeys. They're not in season. I can't shoot them right now. You better leave them alone, or the game warden's going to get you." So he has turkeys now. He's got a whole flock of turkeys running around on his place, and his Karen neighbors can't say anything because they're wild turkeys. I mean, like,
Don't get the white one. Imagine if he had the nice show turkey outside,
yeah. Or peacocks. Never get a peacock unless you hate your life.
Oh, they're so loud.
They're so obnoxious. They really are, and they're not good to eat. So
I don't know.
I bet that's a lie, though. They look an awful lot like a pheasant to me.
Yeah, I bet they. Yeah, depends on how old it is, maybe.
How hungry you are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that's sort of one aspect of winter food production, right? It's not just growing your own food, but it's also raising your own food, right?
Yeah.
Is that something
And
that we should touch on? And foraging, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. Nicole, you want to go first on that?
I had a great day on Monday because I realized I've committed to providing a huge salad once a week for my neighborhood, and I'm buying groceries once a month and didn't buy salad. And I'm not growing it right now. So I went on a walk. And on my walk, I found a lot of watercress and other spring greens that are coming up, like dandelions are coming up. There's a whole bunch of stuff coming up. And so if you learn which plants you can eat, and a lot of things for people in the north, in another month, I guess probably it'll be happening for you. You start getting all of these really good to eat, like chickweed, and chickweed's not up here yet, but that sort of thing will start coming out, and you can just eat that. And so I think that is a life skill. So you talk about being prepared in like storing what you eat, eating what you store, and having a methodical way of working through that. But there's a different way to be prepared, and that's your knowledge. So if you learn what you can eat that just grows around you, it takes no work for me to grow dead nettle or watercress or and then of course I have a garden, so I have all these random things that are still there that shouldn't be alive. So I went and harvested a bunch of that. Or stinging nettles are up here. You can eat those if you boil them. So if you learn those things, that's a pretty awesome way to be prepared. And the nutritional, like, you get different vitamin profiles, I think, from all of these things. And so, having that different vitamin profile, I've always thought is healthy. I'll notice when I'm walking in the woods, I'll be like, what's that plant? What's that plant? About the third time I ask myself, I go figure out what that plant is. And usually it's like, oh, that's a vitamin D producing stinging nettle. Yeah. Oh, I'm deficient in vitamin D because I stopped making it for some reason 3 years ago. I guess I better eat that thing. It's funny. It's like they talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get like some decent forage right now. And then what'll happen is like the plants are all like, oh, it's Indian summer. And then something's going to come in and whack them. We'll get a heavy freeze in late January, early February, but then it'll all start again, like right after that freeze, and it will go nuts. And we have things like we get wild hyacinth, which has these little bulbs you can eat. And
oh yeah,
there's tons of stuff that we end up harvesting right about now because it didn't matter that they went dormant. Like I just harvested out of 2 tubs. I just harvested like a couple pounds out of each tub of water chestnut. And so that's something we have now. So there's also some late harvest stuff. But when you were talking about like raising food, now we're talking about livestock. So like my ducks are actually on the uptick of their egg production. Like they once they get through the solstice and those days start getting longer, they don't care that it's cold. They care about length of light. So we have plenty of egg coming now. So we should make sure that we have enough for the ducks to eat, and they're going to produce for us. My little Bantam chickens have just started laying. If they were larger birds, you know, I could already be hatching birds to raise out for meat. So I have a spring harvest of meat. If you have goats like Nicole does, you know, I think the best use of a goat is to put a bullet in its head and barbecue it. Except
goats are for petting.
Goats are for petting, and for Nicole needs something to mow her property because
weed whacker.
When the rains kick in, she grows so fast that she would literally do nothing but mow if she didn't have a goat.
Yeah, ducks don't keep up with it here. That's for sure.
So goats can serve that purpose if they don't hang themselves. Because I did save one of Nicole's goats' lives.
Still alive. She's still alive.
Yep, she flipped over, wrapped her chain around her neck, and was laying on the ground like this.
Oh my God.
And I was the only one there, and I'm going, I could eat that goat tonight if I didn't do it. And I was like, I can't do that. So I saved her. And I mean, so like all of the livestock stuff, in fact, if you think about it, the colder your climate, the more you probably want to rely on livestock. Because if you look at civilizations over time, especially if we go pre-statist civilizations where we weren't growing. So when I say civilization, then I mean little villages and little tribes and stuff, you know, things like that. The further you move from the equator, the more humans rely on animals for food. The closer you move to the equator, the more they rely on plants. So when you get into northern climates, there's always something you can stab, shoot, or beat. You can eat because you can't live on lichen, but a reindeer can, right? You can't live on moss, but a muskox can. Like you are seriously at the top of the climate, you know, part of the world, the coldest you can get if you're living on muskox or polar bears or penguin, but you can do that. So the more you go to cold climate, the more carnivorous it makes sense to design your life to be. And so that's something to consider as well. Except you got to make sure when you start talking about livestock, you're talking about things that can die.
Yeah.
And when it gets cold and shit freezes,
right,
you got to get them water. Yep. So like you got to be much better prepared than I am. Like if my pipes freeze up on me for a day, or I've blown them out so they won't freeze, I know in 2 more days my water's going to be back on. If you freeze up in Pennsylvania, you might be gone for 30 days. Yeah. And your animals will be dead. So you need to make sure that you're more buttoned down on that if you're in more northern climates, that the animals won't starve or dehydrate.
Well, livestock is also your off-grid refrigerant.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. People don't think about that. When they're alive, they don't go bad. And so if you have no power and you can't keep your meat frozen and it's walking around on 2 legs, you don't have to keep your meat frozen. Yeah. That's
good
the other
point.
Thing. Like you process. Well, Jack got me started on Wartime Farm, and now I've been through the whole series. And there was, I can't remember which series it was, but they were like, you process the pig, and it's got to be gone, and either cured or delivered within a day or 2. And so what would happen would be the farmer would be like, I'm processing my pig this day. Everybody come buy it, right? Or shipping it to the city to feed people, and then the rest of the pigs are walking around on 4 legs waiting for
they process that
for their time. Pig. Yeah.
And that's an ordeal to do a pig. So like, that's why it's a really good idea for small scale producers to look at things like quail, chickens to a lesser degree, I would say, and like rabbits, right? The rabbit, the bunny, man, the bunny is a meat production machine. Because the rabbit is probably the animal that you can feed the most without buying feed.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
They eat grass and clover. Like they like to eat grass and clover. Like if you think about it, like you grow a little alfalfa, a little bit of clover, and some ryegrass, and you can feed your bunnies. And so then these bunnies are alive, like Nicole's saying. So if I have 20 grown out fryer sized bunnies and I don't have freezer space, or there's a pretty bad ice storm coming in that might knock the power. Now, one less thing, if I don't have to worry about that deep freeze, there's one less thing to worry about. How many rabbits do I need this week? One. Okay. Sorry, bunny, it's your turn. And everybody else just gets a little bit bigger until I'm ready to take those for a meat harvest. And quail, I mean, quail, I can process a quail with my bare hands from a live little head looking around, trying to figure out what's going to happen, to here's 2 leg quarters and a breast in about 20 seconds. You know, I mean, the eyes are still blinking on the head that's on the ground, and it's done. And it's not actually that hard to do. So that
you recommend them in place of what, Jack? Chickens, you said?
Well, yeah, they taste like chicken. Like people say they're like chicken, but they're gamey. I'm like, you don't know the word game. Don't get me started on gamey. Like they're like the mildest. They taste like chicken. They taste like chicken. If chicken tasted like chicken is what they taste like, you know. The breast is a little darker than the breast of a chicken. So they're more like, they're all like, the whole thing is like the thigh that you get at a store. Like good farm raised chicken thighs are dark meat. It's like that light colored dark meat you get from Kroger's.
Yeah.
But the whole bird's that way. And they're delicious, man. I mean, and they go from an egg to hatched in 21 days. And then they go from hatched to the size that you can, you know, harvest them and not feel you've wasted it in 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And then they're easy to brood. They're just like, you put them in an incubator, just like chickens. They're a little fragile when they hatch, because when they hatch, they're like the size of a golf ball. But once you get them to that first week, they're just as easy as chickens.
A few people on YouTube are saying that rabbits are great for composting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're poop.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
But they're poop.
I never thought I'd say this, but the beautiful thing about rabbit poop is it doesn't need to be composted. It's what's known as a cool manure. So you can literally take rabbit pellets and just put it in your garden. We're like, you don't do that with chicken manure or pig manure. Like, it's got to be composted to be safe. It's not just safety. It's the nitrogen is too high to use it a direct application. It can actually cause plants to burn if you use like direct application of those manures. So rabbits are great for that. I was just, somebody on my blog after an episode was talking about how they have basically like an outdoor rabbit pen where the rabbits are on the ground and instead of hutches.
Oh,
and they've trained the rabbits. I don't know how you do this, but they train the rabbits to shit in one corner.
Rabbits do that naturally.
So they put like a litter pan basically in there, and then the rabbits shit in the litter pan, and then you just go out and pick your fertilizer up, and you don't have to do any
convenient
work. And I'm like, I didn't know rabbits would like I guess like cats do, but then that way they're feeding their rabbits on, you know, grass and clover and stuff, and it's now I'm thinking maybe I can do rabbits because I don't need one more thing to do, and rabbits in a hutch just seem like one more thing to do, but I've always wanted them. And then the fact that they can be trained to poop in a spot.
Well, they're like pigs.
Because I'm not going to be out there raking rabbit poop. I'm sorry, I have my limits, and that's...
Yeah, no, they like to, I mean, they kind of instinctively like to poop in one place.
Yeah.
And be clean in another. Because I had pet rabbits when I was growing up. I never got the litter box training part. It was just when it started, that's where it was. So once they've, like, if there's poop and pee already, that they're going to want to go back there. So
the key is I need like a handful of turd, and then
or get them in there and see where they're going and put the litter box there, and they'll probably just keep going there. Would be
my other concern with like raising them that way though is like when you do them in hutches, you have to bring the doe to the buck, because if you bring the buck to the doe, she'll castrate him. So I guess when they all have space, they all get along, and they don't do that. Because I don't know, man. That's
wait, the males and the females fight?
Well, okay, so if you take a male via rabbit hutches and you bring the male into the doe, into her hutch,
into her nest,
she will.
Oh, wow.
Because he's a threat, I think, is what it is. He's
and it's her territory.
Her kittens, basically.
Oh, wow.
But I guess when you do them more in a colony style, they can cohabitate, which makes sense because you know, if that happened in nature, there'd be no rabbits, and we all know there's no rabbit shortage.
Right. Sure.
I had an interview on my podcast in December with somebody who raises rabbits.
Yeah.
And the first thing they did, because it was more natural rabbit-like behaviors, they had a big pen, and then the rabbits would dig burrows, and that's what they did because it seemed easier. But then she said what was hard was knowing if a rabbit was pregnant or if they'd had kits, because some of them burrowed way down underground.
Yeah.
And they were like, they bred one of them again because, and then came back and she had rabbits in her.
Okay, so they were still breeding them, so they weren't completely cohabitating.
Right, they weren't completely. It wasn't like laissez-faire rabbit world.
See, that's what I want. I want laissez-faire, or I don't want rabbits.
Yeah. I don't know. I could talk to her about. I'm going to see her in a couple of weeks, but yeah.
My goal is to get David to raise rabbits, so I don't have to.
That's a great idea.
Which is actually, that's the plan too. Like that's back to community building, right? Like all this shit we're talking about, no one's going to do all of it. But so if you can like empower your neighbor to become the rabbit person, you know, if somebody would do that for me, I would totally go out there with my scythe once a week and bring them a couple buckets of feed. Yeah. Like I would, because it would be, it's kind of like meditational for me to use a scythe. It's like martial arts, right? So like, I would be happy to do that. So like, the more you can build community like that and get other people taking it on, because one person with a rabbitry can make way more rabbits than, you know, 4 families need. I think it's one buck and 2 does will produce more meat per year out of a rabbitry than a large meat goat can produce, growing one of those a year. And that's impressive, since you can do it with, you know, your lawn mostly. Yeah. I mean, I'd still feed some pellets, but you can do mostly your lawn.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I think we do need to be thinking more and more about how to feed our animals.
Yes.
From our own land than we have in the past, because it looks like we're going to see more and more crop shortages going forward. And that's going to elevate feed prices and limit access to feed. And then a lot of us don't want to feed the cheap feed to our animals. Like I do not feed my birds anything with soy in it because my customers don't want soy in their eggs. Right. So like that's going to elevate my prices. So that's why I'm doing like the duckponics thing. I'm going to be using a totally invasive, and you'll love it, Sal. It's totally illegal, war against the state plant called water hyacinth to feed my ducks next year as part of that system.
Nice.
You know, and they say it's invasive. So if anybody shows up, my plan is to go, some bitch, you're right. It showed up.
Only you knew where you could get some stock for free of that.
Just invaded.
Yeah.
All right. So wait, we're winding down here, but I do want to ask you guys one more question before we get going, because I'm completely ignorant when it comes to animal husbandry. I don't know the first thing about it. Is it the sort of thing though? Because it seems like in winter that it becomes like extreme, like much more difficult, because now you have to house all these animals and keep them warm. Is that correct?
It depends. Like I know one dude named Brad up in Michigan. He keeps quail in his garage. He does about 20,000 eggs a year and like 1,000 coal meat birds. He has 1 stack of quail in a 1-car garage. It is no more difficult for him to do that in February than it is to do it in August, because you've got a garage, right? So my ducks, when it's 15, when it rarely gets down to 15 degrees here, they sit in the shade. So as long as I can get them water, it's no big deal. I don't know what that would be like if I was in Michigan, right? Like, I guess if you, but I mean, I know people that do it. Like Ben Falk lives in freaking zone 4 near 3 in New Hampshire or Vermont.
Well, and
he has ducks and geese and sheep. And I mean, it's water and shelter. Like most of the time they can handle the cold temperatures. They have to be able to get out of the wind, and then
water,
because you know they can't drink ice. Like, so I know people that like their ponds freeze over and they have to go out and break the ice on the pond so that the cows can drink. And as long as they do that and the ice doesn't build too thick and their livestock can get to the pond, it's no big deal. But I don't care what time of year it is, what you'll learn if you do livestock, it ties you to your property far more than if you do not. You can automate your garden completely. You can leave for 3 weeks and come back and you have bigger plants. you can do a lot of automation with livestock, but you can't do it completely. I mean, when we go on vacation for like more than a day, we pay somebody to basically live here. And you know, it's worth it to me, but not everybody maybe is able to do that. You know, to me, it's worth it because I have all these ponds and stuff. And I know if the power goes off while I'm in Florida, like it did 2 years ago, that the guy that I have do that knows how to run a generator and will have all my pumps running and my fish won't die, because that particular trip, the power is off for 3 days. That's very unusual here, but it can happen. So you have to, like, because of that, I'm going to be putting in, again, at my workshop that you weren't at. We had a guy named Harry that came out and he showed us how for under $200 with off-the-shelf products, you just plug together. We literally put it together. Like, he had 3 people that didn't know anything. He made sure they were like completely ignorant to solar technology, plug it together and get it working in less than 15 minutes out in our front yard. So I'm going to take my bigger ponds and I'm going to install that as a redundancy system. So at least that's there during the day. And you just have to think a lot. I mean, Nicole, you live in a colder climate than I do, and you have a goat. So
what I've done here on freezes, first of all, don't put your stock tank by the fence if you have a goat, because when it freezes solid, it becomes a stepping stone over which the goat can launch. That's one piece of information. The way I kept them in water, and it's terrible, but I only had 2 goats.
Yeah.
I would bring warm water up every 2 hours for them, a gallon at a time.
Really?
But we had a 2-week here, you know, like if it was all winter long like that, I would have done something different. But here we had a 2-week stint of it never got above freezing, which is very unusual. We had 10 inches of snow, and the ducks, on the other hand, got to go to the creek.
Yeah.
I didn't even worry about the ducks because they're going to go to the creek and the pond anyway. And the creek is moving and it wasn't frozen over. If it had frozen over, I would have worried about it. But so my homestead's changed since you've been here, Jack. I have pigs now.
You have pigs?
And I have pigs. Well, I'm trying to make pigs right now. So Lady Pig moved in and her purpose is to be Mama Pig. And then Brutus, her gentleman caller, arrived and they were doing it wrong. Like, she was mounting him all of December. I'm like, come on, man, that's not how it works. Christmas Day, my neighbor Tactical goes out to feed the pigs, and I get this picture of him mounting her. And he said it's a Christmas miracle. So we might have pigs in the middle of my workshop, actually, if that took. But yeah, so we have pigs, and they have a big, like, 55-gallon drum with a stock tank heater in it, and then a spout out of which they can drink. So I do use stock tank heaters for that.
Yeah, that helps tons.
If the power were to go out, you know, I'll deal with it.
I have like a utility sink in my my, what do you call it? Like my pantry and laundry room. Yeah. See, I don't know because I don't do laundry. So the laundry room, and you can put a hose on it. So I've had like weeks where it's been below freezing. We've had weeks where the whole week it never got above freezing. And I've run, 3 hoses linked together with water from the utility sink out to them, and whatever it takes. And I would just say, actually, I think a lot of times people in the northern climates, it's easier because everything in a northern climate is designed to protect your water system from freezing. And the further south you go and the less you have to worry about it, the less it's worried about. And the more likely you are to wake up in the morning and go, what's that loud humming sound? And you look out and your well house, the light went out in it and water is spraying in like, it's like, it looks like a snow machine. Like when they have the snow machines at the ski places and it's like spraying snow. And I'm like, that's going to be fun.
See, I have a rocket mass heater in my pump house now. I got to use it for the first time this year. It finally got cold enough. And I was like, that thing's awesome.
I just went I put 3 light bulbs out there now. So, unless all at the same time, but you're right. It's
Sal, back to your question about the seasonality of livestock. It is a thing that livestock tends to get processed. You think about how many you're going to feed over the winter.
Yeah.
So cows get processed in November and December a lot. Pigs around here get processed in January, February a lot. I mean, they get processed year round, but I do see my farmer friends who have enough stock to worry about this. I don't. they're reducing so they don't have to feed them. Because I go through a lot of feed on those pigs right now.
Yeah,
That makes
They're
sense,
not
though.
rotating through the woods at the moment.
Yeah, when you can put them out on the land and they can get food, you
Mhm.
know, and like so here right now we have grass growing. It's this
Yeah.
tall. Yeah, it doesn't grow with any speed, so they can only get so much. And it's our lean time. Like even in the summer, like all grass all turns brown in the summer. They don't want to eat it, but then we have like a gazillion grasshoppers. So like the chickens, the turkeys, the ducks, they're just living on protein at that point. And it's great feed for them. The winter, you do think about that, and you again, whatever you're going to cull. And if you think about it, it's a great time of year because like you got Christmas and Thanksgiving, right? So it's a good time to feed.
Right.
Yeah.
But you also have the great weather where it's because you don't want to. I don't want to process birds in June.
No.
That just sounds like flies and heat and stink, and it's an unpleasant business enough as it is. I don't want to. In fact, I got some Bantam roosters right now that have to go, and I just the one of them I can't stand him. I picked him up and threw him over the fence yesterday, and I still have. It's not that I don't want to kill him. I don't want. It's like I don't want to process these 3 damn little birds, you know, that are about as big as, you know, like double the size of a quail, and have to do the work. So, but they're probably gonna have to go this weekend because now they're getting big enough to breed, and I've got 3 hens and 4 roosters, and that's a no-go. So, but yeah, you got to start, you know, this time of year deciding who do you want to provide that extra feed for that you have to buy because you can't naturally provide it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that sums it up. All right, we're coming up on that time. Should we give some final thoughts and wrap it up here?
Sure.
Maybe tell everybody where they can find our stuff because I feel like we don't do that as often as we probably should. So maybe Nicole, you want to go first?
Well, if you love the Unloose the Goose podcast, give us a review on whatever podcatcher you're using.
Yes.
Unloosethegoose.com is where you find all of our like connections to all our social. Find us on Telegram. MeWe's starting to tick up a little bit now too. So get involved in the conversation. And then if you want to connect with me, it's livingfreeintennessee.com. I do a 3 times a week podcast. And of course, you can always buy awesome coffee at hollowroast.com.
I was drinking that coffee tonight.
Good. Which one?
Colombian. I'm
like
Jack's,
that one?
Yeah, the Colombian's really good, guys. Give her Colombian a try. I'm Jack Spirko. My show's thesurvivalpodcast.com. And you can check that out. We do 5 days a week, and we got lots of cool stuff going on. And check out Miyagi Mornings on YouTube. That's something I've been doing since my workshop. And I call it Miyagi Mornings, not because I'm Mr. Miyagi, but because I usually, if it's not too cold, do them out in front of the Miyagi ponds in the backyard. And I've been covering all kinds of cool stuff, some related to freedom and liberty, and some related to food production, and some related to me yelling at you because you're not working hard enough yet. And if you just search for Miyagi Mornings, I'm sure I'm the only one doing that right now. And it's on YouTube and Odyssey.
Yeah, I've caught a couple of them. Those are very cool. You guys can follow me at salvagors.com, Sal Mayweather, or at Sally Mayweather on all of your major social media platforms. Sign up for the cryptocurrency discussion group that Jack started, and he was nice enough to let me in as a mod. It's the cryptocurrency practical discussion group on MeWe. And we'll throw up a link. Maybe we can try to get a link up there on the show notes page for everybody.
Yep. And don't forget the Greater Reset Conference.
Yeah.
I said the wrong website address earlier. It's thegreaterreset.org, the 25th through 29th. And it's a reaction to the Great Reset, which we've talked about, right? What's that look like for us, Jack? The Great Reset. What do we lose?
It looks like a nightmare. We lose everything.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's basically the people behind it. The World Economic Forum have stated that the year is 2030. You own nothing. You've never been so happy.
You have no privacy.
Yeah. That's the pitch. I'm not kidding. I didn't make like when you tell people what they're saying, they think you're making up a conspiracy theory.
No, go look it up.
This is they have a brochure that says that on it. And their goal in life, it seems, is to make it where all the cash is digital, but not in a good way. There is hardly any meat being consumed in the world. And we're all renters of everything that we want. And my response to that is you can go screw.
Right.
And I will shoot you in the face before I let you do that. This is my little kingdom that I've created. We're talking about all these ways we feed ourselves, but basically we build our homesteads out with that in mind. Like, this is my little kingdom. And, you know, I'm not going to be up like Xavier is tonight on top of the Capitol building trying to pull the spire down. But if you come here and try to take my shit, I'm going to shoot you in the face, maybe with a 3D printed gun. I don't know. But I think
John had a very different idea though, right?
Yeah.
His reaction was like, let's have a conference about a greater reset where we can harness the creativity and the individuality that exists in our world and make it a better place. One person at a time, each person making their better place for what their better place looks like. So I think it's gonna be a really cool conference.
Yeah, and what I like about it is that it's really sort of centered around solutions, and there's a very heavy influence from the Agorist community. So I think if you guys are interested in learning not just about the Great Reset, but how to survive it, it's definitely one of those things that you're not going to want to miss.
Yep.
And kind of where I was going there with that is, okay, so this is their plan, right? So we have to have a counter plan, and I believe that in a country like the United States of America, we are so big and so vast. And we talked about like central planning and stuff like that and zoning and stuff in other episodes. This plan is really city centric. And their plan is to put, and this, again, it's all stated. I'm not making this stuff up, guys, to push as many people as they can into the cities out of the rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to create an opportunity for like thousands of little neutral zones of like Nicole and Jack and maybe Sal, if we ever get him out in the sticks. Like, it's too much trouble. Like, how much, like, when you are trying to control people, you want to control the herd, and the few that stray off, you know, and that's, but I think it's also going to become over time very, very expensive to acquire property in one of these areas, because like people like us, we're not leaving, we're not going anywhere. And some of us are buying more. Like Nicole, you mentioned your friend that bought a place before we got on air, bought a place and bought another place. And yeah, I mean, like, we're becoming little land barons. We're not trying to own 1,000 acres, but, you know, 20, 30, 40. And I think the opportunities, I know we're kind of off topic, but the monetary opportunities in this are land, cryptocurrency, and specifically privacy coins. So yeah, I put the cryptocurrency group in the chat on YouTube, by the way.
Oh, cool. Perfect. Yeah, I see it. Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, anything else before we sign off, or anybody?
Subscribe to us, man. You know.
Yeah, and hit that bell to subscribe for notifications too. This way, when we come on, you'll get a notification. So,